All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to virtual night 7, the second to last night of our 8-night class. I hope everyone had a fantastic President's Day and you are enjoying your Monday night off. As I've said multiple times before, Wednesday will be our final. Last Wednesday, we got about 70% of the way there. And after this video tonight, you should be able to get it the rest of the way there. So I'm going to break up this video into kind of two separate sections. It shouldn't take longer than 20 or 30 minutes since I'm just going to be going through examples. And obviously we don't have people in class to follow along and ask questions, but we'll walk you through everything that you need to do first on the analytics pane, which is what we would typically cover tonight if we didn't have it off for President's Day. That should take about 15 minutes or so. And then the second half of this video will be for the last two things that we need to do for the final projects, which will be dashboard actions. So since you guys aren't here, I don't need to ramble anymore. Let's go ahead and get into it. So I have Tableau Public pulled up over here. Hopefully you guys are getting tired of going through this process by now. It should be like second nature at this point. But we're going to open up Microsoft Excel, click into our Superstore data, drag over our orders, and go to sheet 1. So we have pretty extensively covered everything that you see on the page here. We've covered our dimensions, we've covered our measures, our marks tab with our color, size, text, detail, and tooltip, filters, columns, rows, our sheet itself, the show me tab, right? We can click into it. We've covered all the formatting stuff. The one area that we haven't covered is this fancy little tab right here called the analytics pane. So when I click into that, it's broken up into 3 sections here: summarize, model, and custom. Really, all we're going to be covering tonight are these first two, summarize and model, because custom is essentially just a subset of those with some different, as the name states, customizable options. So summarize, there's the constant line, average line, median with quartiles, box plot, and totals. We'll go through each one of those. Those are pretty straightforward. They're just kind of drag and drop ways to, as the name suggests, summarize your data. And then the model section here, average with 95% CI, that stands for confidence interval, median with 95% CI, trend line, forecast, and cluster. Those are some of the cool, again, as the name suggests, kind of data science-y model building things that we can do. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're just going to be pretty straightforward here. We're going to drag our order date onto columns. We're going to drag our sales onto rows. Let's see how I want to start here. Yeah, let's go ahead and change this to the month, the second month of the year, May 2015. So we've seen this a million times. Here's our order date. Here's our sales. If I want to, let's say we have a monthly sales goal of 70K. If I want to just label where 70K is at on here, I drag my constant line over right onto table. Whoops, actually, that's a good example to show you why you shouldn't do that. Let's drag these off. I drag my constant line. Table will give me what it just did, 2 lines, one going up the x-axis, one going up the y-axis. If I want to show it just on my x-axis, right, along the month, if I want to have a constant line for a specific month, I would drag it here. Or if I wanted to keep the example I was doing and have a constant line for a specific sales target, say 70,000, I would drag it here. So it gives you this little line. Right now, I have no idea how it came up with this, probably the minimum, 4,520. I want to set this, the value here, at 70,000, and voila, I have a line right here. You can see there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different months that we hit our goal of 70,000. Now, the other way, right, if I wanted to drag on a specific month, say we implemented a new process or new pricing and packaging in November 2016 or something like that. I could drag this. It gives me my line. I can change this to November. Uh, 2016, and voila. I have a line here. Now, there's some things you can do to make these a little better. Like maybe I want this to say like sales target as opposed to 70,000. All you have to do is right click onto that, click edit. And instead of a value here of 70,000, which is a constant, right, 70,000 constant. Here's my label. Right now, I'm just labeling it as the value. I can change that label to custom and then just type in sales goal. And then maybe I actually want to tell them what the label is too. If I click in here, it'll let me type in field name, field label, computation, or value. So I'm going to go sales goal and hit this value. And it'll automatically, right, we've seen those brackets before. We know that's referencing a variable, sales goal 70,000. So that's a little bit easier to label, a little easier to read. And then here, November 2016, well, what happened November 2016? We can go edit. And again, label instead of a value. Let's make it custom. And we can do something like new P&P for pricing and packaging. So this is just a good way to annotate your views as you're building these out to provide a little bit more context for your end user to understand what's happening on the chart. I use these all the time. For instance, we just kind of wrapped up our financial closing for January. January is always a really slow month for us in the construction space because not a whole lot of people are building homes. So for people to understand why there was a dip in January, I labeled January 2025, January 2024, January 2023, so they can kind of see the seasonality there. So that's the constant line. I'll rename this because I'll publish this workbook if you guys want to use it. Constant line. Create a new tab here. We're going to do the same thing. Order date on columns, month, and bring our sales right here. Next thing is really straightforward, just an average line. Drag these over. We've talked about tables, panes, and cells before. In this case, they're kind of all the same because I don't have any panes, right? There's just one table. So I'll drag it on the table and voila, that just gives you my average. Again, if I hover, I can see the average sales I've done in a month is 47,000. I typically don't like to have to hover. I like having all the information that I need right there. So if I click edit, again, we can make this label custom and we can call it average. Click this little arrow and show the value. Voila, there's our average line. Let's rename this average, average line. Let's create a new sheet. We're going to keep doing the same thing just for simplicity's sake. Drag over order date. Change this to month. Drag sales onto that. Next option here is a median with quartiles. If I drag this over, instead of the average line, it's going to give me my median line, which is 39,000 in this case. It's also going to give me, so the median is at the 50% quartile, right? What's right in the middle. It'll give me my 75% and 25% quartiles as well too. So the upper quartile is 65,000, which means that 75% of things are below this and 25% of things are above it. And my lower quartile here, 29,000, that means that 25% of things are below it, 75% of things are above it. So 50% of things are between these two values, which is why it's shaded with the median showing right there. Again, you can click into these, click edit, and change the label if you want. Median with the value. Inside these, actually, we won't get to those quite yet. You can change the line values if you like dotted lines or want to call it out purple. And some different things in here as well too. If you wanted to shade everything above it, you could do that. But let's just leave everything as it was. All right, so there's the constant line, average line, and the median with quartiles. And then the last thing that we will show is the box plot. Second to last thing, sorry. Order date up here. Month. Sales right here. We drag the box plot over here. It will give us, I don't know if you guys remember box plots. I learned about them in like elementary school, or they might be called box and whiskers. The middle part here is actually the same as the median with quartiles. So the median line, 39,000, upper hinge of 67,000, lower hinge of 29,000. Again, that's the same thing, 75% quartile, 50%, 25% quartile. But it also gives you these upper whiskers and lower whiskers, which is essentially just your minimum and your maximum values here. So when you would use this, probably wouldn't be in a case like this. Trying to think of a good use case for it. Maybe if I had something like this, where I had all of my sales by my different subcategories, something like this. And I wanted to clearly show, instead of showing all these individual dots, I just wanted to show kind of a summary of what our subcategory sales looks like. I could make the dots really small to not overwhelm people and just show this box and whisker, which summarizes all of it instead of showing the individual points. So I'm going to rename this box plot 1. And I'm going to rename this box plot 2. All right, last thing is totals. So for that, I'm actually going to build a table that you guys are familiar with, where we have category on our rows and subcategory on our rows. And let's say we wanted to show sales here. So this is really good. We can see how many sales there are for each subcategory, but maybe we wanted to total up our totals as well too, or our individual categories as well too. So same thing, totals, it will give you subtotals and a grand total. I'll show you what those are. You drag it onto subtotals, voila. Here's our individual sales for our subcategories, and then the total sales for the furniture, individual sales by subcategory, total sales for office supplies, so on and so forth. And then if you wanted to summarize all of these into one grand total, you drag this onto column grand totals, and voila, this is summing up everything that's above it. This is how many total sales that we've done. Now, you may have seen that there was also a row grand total. So if I had something like region on my columns, so I have a two-dimensional table here, right? Same thing, we have our subtotals and we have our grand total. I could also drag in my row grand totals here. So now for bookcases, it's going to go all the way across and sum that up, all the way down and sum that up. And then again, the total for our furniture will be over here. Here's the total for everything right there. All right, so I will rename this totals. All right, so that's the summarized section. Again, just kind of good for providing additional context or summarizing what's on your screen. Right, here's some additional context of what our sales goal was when we introduced new pricing and packaging. We just want to show what the average is for everything, the median, the box plot examples that we did. Again, these are just summarizing what's in the background into one just kind of consistent view. And then the totals, really good for just, I mainly use it in table views like this, but you could technically, if I drag order date up here, month, sales, let's say I had something like this, where I have my different category sales broken out. I could, oh, actually I can't, it won't let me. So never mind, just stick with it for table views. All right, now let's move into the exciting stuff, which is the model section here. So we are going to, I'm actually going to color code these for you guys as blue, because those are the summary examples. And then I'll have the model examples in red or something. Okay, so the first one, average with 95% confidence interval. So if I wanted to, let's keep the same example. Let's bring order date up here in sales. If I bring this over, I'm going to get the average just like it was before, but I also have these new bands that are showing what the 95% confidence interval of the average is. So that's saying if I were to get a new plot in here, a new point, the average of that new point that I could say with 95% confidence would be somewhere between these two bands. So if I click in and I edit this, if I wanted to be more confident that it was going to be between those two bands, right? If I change it to 99%, it's going to get wider. So it's going to give me more leeway that the next average will be somewhere between these. If I don't need to be as confident, say I only need to be 50% confident, it's going to get much smaller. So obviously this isn't a model building course. We don't need to go into all the nuance of how you come up with these confidence intervals. But when you do take that course and you do understand it more in depth, you will want to show these confidence intervals anytime you're building some sort of model and wanting to show what you think the next average will be. So that's really cool. I will call this average with 95% CI for confidence interval. I will color that red. The next one is exactly the same. If I drag my order dates up there, whoops. Except instead of an average, it's a median. So month sales, median with 95% CI. Again, I'm going to have that same median number, but with these confidence intervals in there. So if we were forecasting out, we could be 95% confidence. The next one would be somewhere between this. Median with 95% CI. Color that red. All right. The next one I think is very cool. And to highlight how cool it is, we're going to build this a little differently. We're still going to drag our order date up here, but we're going to expand it and expand the quarter and get rid of the quarter. So we have year and month here. Now we're going to drag sales onto here. And the reason I did this is because we've already looked at this before. We know there's some seasonality to it. So I wanted to break it up to show the different kind of individual years. If I want to model out the trajectory that we're on with the trend line, same thing. I start to drag this over here. It's going to give me 5 different out-of-the-box models to do this. And again, we're not going to get into all the nuances and details between a linear trend line, a logarithmic, exponential, polynomial, or power. But the point is you can try these different trend lines. If I were to just toss this on linear, right, it'll give me the trend for each one of these. If I hover over it, it will give me the R squared and P values for these, along with what the actual trend line is, right? So here it's 4,843 times the month of order date plus 8870. So I could take that formula out, and here's month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, month 7, blah, 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 all the way to month 12. If I wanted to model out what month 13 would be, I could use this formula right here to actually do that. Now, is the linear trend line the right one? Well, the p-value to decide if it's statistically significant or not is pretty close, 0.01. However, let's say we wanted to try like an exponential trend line. Well, this looks like it might fit a little bit closer. The p-value is 0.011 now, so slightly better fit. I could try a polynomial trend line here because it does look like we maybe have some seasonality in the spring, then again in the winter. P-value is not as good there, so not as good of a fit. But again, the point is you don't need to understand the differences between all these different types of trend lines. The point is that you can model them all out with very easy drag and drop functionality in Tableau. Trend line. Now you may be thinking, Charlie, if there's seasonality in there, wouldn't we want to bake that into the forecast? You're saying month 13th is going to go up here, but we can see in 2015 that January dips down below again. That's what happens every single month. You're right. And that's where the forecast comes into play. So let's go ahead and just duplicate this tab. Let's drag our trend lines off, go back into the analytics pane and pull this forecast in. So what this is going to do, right? We have 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. It's actually going to model out what 2018 is going to look like based on that seasonality from the prior 4 years. So you can see it thinks we're going to have a dip down below in January. That makes sense because that dips below in January every single month. Thinks that we're going to have a good spring. Thinks that we're going to come down in the summer months again and then finish high in December. The bands around each one of those, if I were to click into this, go to forecast options. It is showing that same, what we had just talked about. Hopefully everything's kind of coming together now. 95% confidence interval. So if I didn't want to show that, I would uncheck that and I would just have my line. I would highly recommend always showing those confidence intervals based on anytime you're doing any sort of forecasting. You can see by default, it's set for 95%. If I needed to be really, really sure about it, I'd maybe set it to 99%. You can see it gets a little wider, gives us more leeway. So we can say we're 95% confident that the trend line is going to fit inside there. If it doesn't matter as much, you can drop it to 90. It gets a little bit tighter in there. There are some different, you can turn off seasonality if you wanted. That's just pretty much going to give you that average line that we had just talked about. But again, since we're working with dates, let's keep that on. And you can actually go in here and build your own trend line model as well too. I would highly discourage that. Tableau is pretty smart. Just keep the automatic in there. And you can choose how far out you want to forecast. So by default, it gives you a year there. Let's do 2 years. Let's go 3 years. You can see that those go out. The confidence intervals get wider and wider as you go, because obviously the farther out you're forecasting, the less and less accurate prediction is going to be. So super powerful stuff. Feel free to do a deep dive into how to build forecasting models if you want, or you can just blindly trust Tableau like I do. All right, the last one is clustering. And this is one I would actually really recommend doing some research on your own. It is a what is called an unsupervised machine learning model. So there's two types of machine learning models, and you guys will take a machine learning class. So I'm not going to go too in depth here. But you have supervised machine learning, which is where you actually have what the outcome is, right? Using like the Titanic data set. You have all these data points. Were they male or female? What was their age? What class were they in? First class, second class, so on and so forth. Did they have children with them? And then they give you the kind of output variable of like, did they survive or not? 1, 0, right? So that's supervised because we train the model and we know what the outcome is. So then when we feed it new information, it can predict the outcome. Unsupervised models would be if we had all the information, but we didn't have what the output is. And we just had to say, what do these things have in common? So then it builds out these different clusters of what they have in common. So when you feed in new data, it can denote them to one of those different clusters. Again, if you want to learn more, there's some fantastic articles out there. K-means clustering. Geeks for Geeks is a fantastic one. Where it can go by, here's your unlabeled data, right? Unsupervised. And it will go and tell you which ones have the most in common with each other to come up with these different clusters. Super complicated stuff. Very, very hard to do. You will learn all about it in your machine learning class, but you can also do it in Tableau. So to show you, let's go ahead and just pull in like profit on the columns, sales into rows, and let's do like subcategory for our colors. So here's all of our subcategories, right? Some of them you make a ton of profit and we have a ton of sales. Some of them we make negative profit but have a ton of sales, like tables. Some of them are dang fasteners, are right in the middle. If I wanted to say which of these subcategories are the most like each other, let's group our subcategories into groups: high earners, low earners, whatever it may be. I can come over here into my cluster, drag that on. It'll give you choose your variables. I'll get to that in a second. And number of clusters. I'll get to that in a second as well too. But if we close out of this, you can see that it's given us 2 clusters. So essentially we have cluster 1 right here. These subcategories have the most in common with each other. And cluster 2 down here, these subcategories have the most in common with each other. Now, again, this is an unsupervised machine learning model. So we don't know necessarily what the clusters mean. We just know that these are the most common with each other and these are the most common with each other. So then you have to take an extra step as a data scientist to dig in the data and kind of name or denote what these clusters are. So I'd say cluster 1, high sales, high profit. These are our money makers. They fly off the shelves. We make a ton of money on them. Cluster 2, low sales, low profit. These are the ones that we could potentially look at cutting costs where we get rid of them. However, if I were to do that again, I can drag additional variables in there as well too. So let's say I wanted to include what the discount is and what the quantity is. And let's get rid of quantity because it added something else in. So now we're actually showing 3 dimensions. So it doesn't really make sense to visualize anymore, but that's why clustering models are so impactful, because they can do multiple dimensions at a time. So we could have found those first 2 clusters with just profit and sales just by looking at the chart, right? These are close together, these are close together. But once you start adding in 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, you no longer can just look at a chart and see which ones are closest and like have the most in common with each other. So you can see once I drug in discount here, it automatically populated a third cluster for our blinders. So potentially these are ones that we give really, really high discounts to, higher than anything else. And that's why it's not like these. It's actually a third cluster as well too. And you can change the number of clusters, but by default, Tableau is always going to give you the one that makes the most sense based on the data points that they have and populate it this way. So again, you'll learn all about k-means clustering in your machine learning class, but the point is you can do it in Tableau. All right, we are like right at half an hour right now, and I said this was only going to be 30 or 40 minutes, and I'm going to stick to that. This is all that we would have covered tonight if we had class in the analytics pane. So feel free to rewatch this video, try these examples on your own, do some additional research into different types of trend lines and what k-means clustering, how to forecast if you so choose. Otherwise, you will learn all about it in your machine learning modeling class. Now, the second half of this, let me rename this real quick, cluster. Label it red. I'm just going to publish this real quick so I can send you guys the link. ODSA night 7. All right, so that's published. Let's go ahead and pull back up. Our final project that we started on last Wednesday. So this is what we need to finish this Wednesday for our final to get our certificates. So I'll open this back up. It'll slowly load. Right, this is what we have. We can change our measure to show. It changes the color. We can change our y-axis. We can change our x-axis. And we can group by different things. The first piece that we need to do to finalize our final project, let me real quick open up our example that we're building towards. Right, we need to go in and add additional values to our parameters, right? So we're gonna have to make a profit margin calculated field, which is just profit divided by sales. And we're gonna have to change our parameter to add that as an option. Then we're gonna have to change our calculated field to include it in our if else statement to work for that option. Days to ship is another calculated field we've already covered in this class, right? That's just gonna be a date diff, order date, ship date, or a date diff, number of days, order date, ship date. Again, add it to your parameter, add it to your calculated field. I think the rest of these we already have. Category, again, ship mode, we already have. Subcategory, product name and city. So those will just be adding in additional parameter choices. We won't have to make calculated fields for them. Just adding them in as parameter choices and then adding in our calculated field. And then the rest of these should just be the same process once you've made the calculated field, just adding them into your parameter, adding them into your calculated field, right? So we'll just do one real quick. For the dimension choice, we need a city. So I'll go into dimension choice here. I'll click edit. I'll add a value, which is just city. I'll click OK. And then our dimension choice calculated field, I'll click edit. And I'll have else if dimension choice equals city, then city. Click OK. And voila, now you can see I can click to that and it'll group by city here. So that'll be one part that you'll have to do is you'll have to add in those additional options. The second piece, and what we're going to cover tonight, is called dashboard actions. So that is in our final project here, right? If we click into Nebraska, this updates for just Nebraska, colored by profit margin for state Nebraska. If I click into Texas here, it will update just for Texas. Alabama, just for Alabama, so on and so forth. So that'll be one we cover. That's called a dashboard filter action. And then the second one, if I click into this and stay hovering over it, you can see I have this little learn more button. That will open up the Wikipedia page for Nebraska. So let's do those one by one. The first that we're going to do is the filter action. So when I click Nebraska, I want this to filter. To do that, again, they're called dashboard actions. We're going to click into dashboard, click into actions, and it pulls up this. Actions let you create interactive relationships between data, dashboard objects, other worksheets, and the web. So we are going to go ahead and click add action. And like I said, the first one we want to filter when we click into Nebraska. So let's click on filter. And we're going to call this state filter. Now our source sheet, we want it, that's the one that we're going to click on, right? That's going to be our map. So make sure just map is checked. Our target sheet is the one we're going to filter. We want that to be the scatter plot. So unclick map, so just the scatter plot is checked. So we have state filter. Map is going to be the source. Scatter plot is going to be the target. And we want to run the action on select. A hover would be as soon as we just hovered over a state, it would update. I don't like that because as you're searching for another state, your other one is going to be filtering like crazy. Menu is going to be when you click and stay hovering, it pops up like that learn more. That's a little extra unnecessarily complicated thing. Select is just going to be you click into it, it updates. That's kind of the go-to. And then when you clear the selection, so when you uncheck it, do you want to keep the filtered values? So when I unchecked Nebraska, do we want to keep just Nebraska showing on our scatter plot? No. I want to show all the values when I uncheck it. So this is pretty much all you need. By default, it's set to all fields. So technically, the only real field we have over here is state, so we'll update it. I always like to be better safe than sorry and choose selected fields. So the source field, right? What do we want to click on? That's going to update. That's just going to be state. And then the target field, you can see it already brought in state. I actually don't think you need that checked. So we named it state filter. Our source sheet is map. Our target sheet is scatter plot. We're going to run the action on select. And when we clear it, we're going to show all the values. And we're just doing that. We're going to filter based on the state on the source sheet and the target sheet. So if we click OK and OK, let's test it out. So let's click into Nebraska. Boom, updates. Let's click into Texas, updates. Unclicking it, right, shows all the values. New York, unclicking it shows all the values. So one thing that I did in my example here, right, is when I clicked into it, I showed actually what state you were filtering. So if I want to do that, I just click into this. And we've used this little insert button before. And we have state right here as an option now. So Nebraska, unchecking it, all. Texas, unchecking it, all. And again, you could make that smaller. And like I did, do something like for state, something like that. All right, so those are dashboard filter actions. And then the last one is going to be, right, when we hover over it, there's that learn more, open up the Wikipedia page. We are going to, again, add a new dashboard action, dashboard actions, add action. This is going to be a go-to URL. So let's call this wiki. Again, our source sheet is going to just be the map. We don't want it, definitely don't want it to open up new pages every time we hover over a state. We probably don't want to open up new pages every time we select because we're going to be selecting to filter our scatter plot. So let's keep it on menu. URL target, new tab. And then the URL, this is where the magic happens. So in Wikipedia, you can see, and the reason I use Wikipedia is, for this example is exactly this. No matter what state I have, it's English, en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Texas, right? If I click into Kansas, /Kansas. If I click into Nevada, /Nevada. So the, I actually don't think I want the HTTPS. I'm just going to copy and paste this URL without the HTTPS : //. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to this URL, but instead of hard coding in which state I want, I'm going to insert our state value. So it gives us this. Let's actually test this. Yeah, okay, I lied. We are going to keep the HTTPS : //. You can test it. Voila, it opens it up. So let's click OK. Okay. So now, if I click into a state, right? My scatter plot updated because of the filter action. And if I hover over to it while it's clicked, I now have this little wiki link. And it opens up Nebraska. Let's test one more. Let's go to California, wiki, and it goes to California. So let's say you wanted to update either one of those. For instance, I don't like the fact that when you hover, it just says wiki. If you want to edit either one of those, you go back to dashboard actions. Instead of adding a new one, you're just going to go here and click edit. And let's call this learn more. Just like it was in the example. Click OK. Click OK. And now it'll show learn more. Cool. So now you guys should have everything that you need to complete the final project. Again, the homework after Wednesday was to make the dashboard your own, make it look pretty, reorganize some stuff, change some titles, change some colors, things like that. So that should all be good. After this video, you'll be able to add in your additional options on your parameters, and you will also be able to add the filter action and the go to URL action. While I'm here, you don't need this for the final, but if you are curious, there are other dashboard actions as well too, right? So we did the filter, we did the go to URL. Highlight is pretty much what it sounds like. If I wanted to just highlight Nebraska values on another chart based on clicking into Nebraska, you do that. Go to sheet would be used if you wanted to like drill in and learn more. So say I had this map here, and when I clicked on Nebraska, I wanted to go to an entirely different sheet and just show fun facts about Nebraska. You can do that. You can actually change your parameter. So if I had a parameter for like state over here, I clicked in Nebraska, it would actually change the value of that parameter and update all my sheets where that parameter was used. And then set values, we're not actually going to cover in this course. That'd be more of a Tableau 201 class. But those are kind of like groups where you can actually change those based on what you click on as well too. So feel free to play around with those. Just to reiterate one more time, we built 70% of this in the class on Wednesday. All that's left to do is to add in the additional parameter values, add in your filter action, and add in your go to URL action. I will publish this new version and send you guys the link right now. Oh, is it going to make me log in again? No. All right. So right after this, thanks for watching. 43 minutes, went a little over. I will send you this recording in Slack. I will send you the first example we did with Analytics Pane, and I will send you this new updated final thing if you want to click in and mess around with some of the options I did with the dashboard actions. And I'll see you guys Wednesday. Thank you very much.